Hey, welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Barrett with Espresso Outlet. Today I have something that I think is going to be kind of fun. We have a lineup of $200 grinders. All four of these grinders are 40mm conical grinders, so pretty much apples to apples comparison in terms of what their abilities should be. So just full disclosure, we don't sell all of these grinders, so some people might say there's a little bit of bias, but I'm going to keep a pretty open mind. So I've been using these grinders off and on for about 2 months, and it's really hard to use all of these as well as some other ones on a daily basis, but I do try to do the same beans and the same brew method when I use these grinders. So I'll do them the same day and do my testing and do some sips of different coffees and different brew methods. So we're gonna go over these one by one. We're gonna talk about kind of the pros and cons and really what I find from a value standpoint. So if you're looking for a grinder, I feel like $200 market, it's actually pretty nice price point. $200, it's a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But also, I mean, it's still, there's much more expensive grinders. So these I find are just kind of the really nice value grinders that you get on the market right now. So let's just take a look. We're gonna start with the SD40. Okay, so the first one on our list is this SD40. I've had this for quite some time. This is actually the version 1 model, and we're now selling the version 2 model. So I know you're gonna ask what's the difference between version 1 and version 2. The version 2 model actually has some upgraded burrs, which we'll see in this SK40 in a little bit, but I've been using the version 1 for about 1.5 years or so, ever since it came out, and I've really enjoyed this grinder. Now, this grinder is a stepped grinder model. So what does that mean? You have a little button on the back and you depress the button and you can rotate to adjust your setting. Now, some people might not care for that when it comes to espresso, because what'll happen is you'll be trying to dial it in and you'll get stuck between some settings. You can see how it kind of clicks, and it's really doesn't look like that much, but it can be the difference between that perfect espresso and one that's maybe a little bit too slow or too fast. So I've never really had that many problems with it when it comes to espresso, but that has been one of the things that I've noticed people mention in forums and just various places like Facebook. So just know that this is a stepped model. This is capable of doing from espresso all the way up to all your more coarse brew methods, such as like your V60, Chemex, and some of the intermediate stuff like Mocha Pot and AeroPress. So it's a nice little grinder. You can see it is quite small. I mean, when I got it out of the box, I thought this thing is just a nice tiny little grinder. Some people, they mentioned when they got the DF64, the DF64 actually had the button in the front, so they opted to put it on the side. So it's really easy to reach that power button when you use this grinder. It is a single dose grinder, so it has a bellows, kind of has a little hopper shape to the bellow. Make sure you can see it. It works really well. It's pretty quiet. All four of these are DC motors, and they have a gearbox inside, so that kind of has more of a windy noise than that electric hum that you get with the AC motors. But I find it to be fairly quiet grinder. I've been using it and mostly use it for probably like pour over type stuff, but it does come with this dosing cup that does fit your 58mm quite nicely. Let's see, I have one. So it does fit that quite nicely. If you have the 54mm, it doesn't quite fit the 54 perfectly, but you can still dose into it really easily. Pretty indicative of most grinders nowadays that they're more designed for the 58mm than the 54 or 53. So I've really thought that the dosing cup is really high quality and have enjoyed using it. It's really easy to use. So that's just my initial take on the SD40. All right, so the next one on the bench is this SK40. And if you take a look at it, it doesn't really look that much different than the SD40. The SD40 is more rounded, this is more squared off. But there is two main differences besides the body styling. So the first is it comes with these new version 2 burrs, and it has an 8-point design, and the new burrs really surprised me. Now, I'm letting you know both of these grinders, if you buy them today, they both come with the version 2 burr. So even though this is the version 1, you'll be getting the version 2. But these version 2 burrs, just straight out the box, I was really surprised. It offered just a lot of just clarity, but you're still getting that mouthfeel that you kind of expect out of that conical grinder. So really surprised me, especially with espresso. That's the first thing that I used it for. I pulled 4 or 5 espresso shots and just thought it was fantastic. This has been used for all brew methods, just similar with all of these. So we've done V60, Chemex AeroPress as our main tests, and it does a fantastic job at all of those. So the next thing that is kind of a big game changer on this is it has a stepless worm gear. Now remember before I mentioned if you're trying to do espresso and you're really trying to dial it in, you can get stuck between 2 settings. On this one you have an infinite fine adjustment, which is really cool. You'll see stuff on like Kyoto E37S. It's a really high-end, $2,000 grinder. Really cool that they're offering something like this on a grinder that's 200 bucks. So I've been really surprised by that. The downside to it, if you look at it as a downside, so let's say you're going between espresso and a drip on the daily basis. You're gonna have to spin this for quite a while. It's not that bad. It takes maybe less than 10 seconds to adjust the setting, but it's definitely much slower than just spinning this. I mean, this is very quick, very easy to adjust. Or this one, it's gonna take you a second to adjust between the settings, but I really feel like that potential con is actually well worth it in my opinion. Now, not to say that this one's bad, but if you're looking for something that's just for espresso, or you're gonna use it mostly for espresso, I really like this one. We'll go over more about that in a little bit. So again, it is a single disc grinder, has a bellows. This model, it only comes in black. I should have mentioned that on this one. This one comes in 3 different color options. This one only comes in black with the oak lid. Another kind of minor change is on the SD40, they put the power button on top and now it's on the side. So it's really not changed the workflow. It's just a little bit different. Utilizes the same dosing cup, and past that, it's the same electronics inside, same motor, same grind chamber, pretty much same everything as the SD40, which I have loved for quite some time. So there really wasn't much to complain about on this, and really they just made it better, or they made it more for espresso-minded people. I'm not gonna say better, because for some people, this probably does make a lot more sense. So that's it on the SK40. Okay, so the next one on our lineup is an offering from Fellow. This is the Fellow Opus. So when they came out with this, and I didn't really know anything about it, I figured that they were gonna go with a flat burr design and kind of make it more espresso focused, because they had the Ode already, which uses 64mm flat burrs, so I thought it was maybe a little bit redundant. But at the same time, if it was more espresso focused, that made some sense to me. I was surprised when they came out with a 40mm conical burr though. So this is, like all 4 of these, a 40mm conical burr. And when I pulled the burrs out, I was really impressed with the burr design. It looked really nice, really premium. So I was excited to try this grinder. Let's just go over some of the features first. So this is a stepped grinder similar to the SD40. And the stepped adjustment is really easy to do. I did find it was kind of hard to dial in espresso because the espresso range is pretty much just right there. I mean, it's very small, so you only get maybe about 6 adjustments for espresso. So I found it even more difficult to dial in the SD40, at least personally. Now, if you take off the hopper, they do have an adjustment mechanism that allows you to kind of cheat the burrs to go finer or coarser on the inside. So that was pretty handy, making it go just like a little bit finer to give me a little bit more grind range. But still, I found it a little bit difficult to dial in the espresso. So that was just my first experience with this. It does have a nice little handy cheat sheet on the inside. And let's see if you can read that. It has at least the suggested ranges, kind of similar to the top dials of this for espresso, AeroPress, pour overs, and so on. But while we're talking about this lid, the one thing that really kind of drove me crazy is I would take my beans and I would dose them, and before I'd put this back on, I'd push this down and it would blow out coffee grounds. So I don't know if this is by design, but it's almost like a bellow. Maybe they designed it that way, but I found it to be kind of a mess depending on how you did your workflow. So make sure to have this dosing cup down there before you put the lid back on, because you're probably gonna get some fines flying out. This does have an ion generator in it. It works okay. It's not maybe the best because there's quite a bit of plastic on this. And I found that plasticky grinders, they tend to have a lot more static problems in my opinion. So I didn't really find that it worked that well. I found it to be quite messy. The power button I found was a little bit strange. You hit it once for 30 seconds, twice for 60, and so on. So a normal 18-gram shot took about the full 30 seconds to grind. It was fairly slow. Let's talk about the dosing cup real quick. So it comes with 2 dosing cup options. First is just the normal cup, and it has a ring on top. So you put the ring on and that locks into the grinder, so it kind of makes it so that there's a seal between the bottom of the grinder and the top of the cup. So that does eliminate some of the mess, if there was any mess, to just blow out the side. So it works okay. I feel like the dosing cup itself is just a little bit awkward, and you have to take this ring off every time. So I found that to be like a little bit annoying, not the end of the world, but it is one more thing, especially when you have a second option, which is designed for espresso. So the espresso, it fits on the same way, and most of the cup, it just remains empty. But when you take it off to dose your espresso, you have this very large cup. But it does fit both the 58 and I have a 54 for a Breville. So it's designed to fit both, which I found to be a pretty nice feature. You're not having just one dosing cup that's pretty much dedicated to 58. It'll go either way. So that's pretty cool. A little bit annoying to have 2 different things laying around. That's just my opinion, but not the end of the world, like I said. So we'll put that back on. Now let's talk about the quality of the coffee, and this is where y'all need to buckle up. So that's where I was really let down on this grinder, and I didn't even want to say it because I just couldn't believe that there was that big of a difference between these 4 grinders. We're gonna go over the Baratza. I think you're gonna be surprised here in a minute. So I tried it with some pour-overs initially, and the pour-overs, they just taste a little bit sour. So I gave it the benefit of the doubt, and I ran some beans through it to make sure that the burrs were seasoned properly. I ran so many beans through this and made sure that they were nice and seasoned and ready to go. And there was one morning I came here and I made a V60 with it, and I'm like, wow, that just tastes terrible. These beans, they just turned overnight. They are just very skunky and off. So I tried again, adjusted the settings. It wasn't that much better. So I went over and I had my SK40 also set up for a V60, had a similar drawdown time, and it tasted normal. So I started scratching my head a little bit on this, and I just never really got a good cup of coffee out of this grinder, unfortunately. I have used it for espresso, and I found the same thing. I found it to be much more sour, and I found it very difficult to dial in. So that was very unfortunate for me on this fellow. I mean, it was really a big disappointment. I expected it to be a lot better than this. So if you've had a different experience, possibly it's just my grinder, but I have tried and tried. I've even neglected some of these other ones trying to get this to make a good cup of coffee, and it's never really performed where I feel like it should have performed. So very disappointing on this, but that's just my experience with this grinder. Okay, last but not least, we have the Baratza Encore ESP. I've been a long time Baratza fan. My first nice grinder was the Baratza Preciso. So it uses 40mm burrs, similar to this. The difference was it was really geared towards espresso, where it had a coarse and a fine adjustment setting. So that was really nice when I was trying to dial in espresso, especially when I got the non-pressurized portafilter that came with my Rocket. I really needed that additional range. So that was about $400. They don't sell that grinder anymore. They've had the Baratza Encore for quite some time. It's been more centered around a brew grinder. So this is the ESP, which gives you a nice espresso range. And when I try to dial this in, I really did not have a problem dialing it in. This is a stepped grinder, so I wasn't quite sure how easy it was going to be to dial in, but it was surprisingly not that difficult to dial in for espresso. Going over some of the features real quick, it does have an on-off switch on the side. It does kind of a bass sound to it where it's kind of a booming sound, where these sound more whiny. This is more deep. A feature that's always been on at least all the grinders that I've had from Baratza, it has a little dose trigger button in the front. So if you're just doing espresso or you're just wanting to top off with a couple more grounds, you can hit that button and not have to flip that whole switch. So it does have 2 ground options. So it has your bulk bin, which is really nice for if you have just like a normal coffee pot. So if you're just doing like a big 12-cup coffee pot, and you want to grind some fresh coffee, you have that nice grounds bin. And it works very well. Been around on all these Baratza models for quite a few years. But they also offer this small tray, which at first I couldn't figure out which way it's supposed to go in. There's a lip missing on the front, so that goes outwards. And you just place that little tray in the front and it has a dosing cup. The dosing cup fits on the inside. Now, it is a little bit messy in my experience when doing espresso, but it did work. It's okay. We're not gonna say it's great, it's okay. Now, whatever this plastic is, it feels like it attracts static, I think, a little bit more than maybe like the plastic cups on the DF64. I know some people love them, some people hate them. I actually kind of prefer them. I have the metal cup, and I thought I might like the metal cup over the plastic. I actually kind of prefer the clear plastic cup. This one seems just a little bit more staticky, but not real bad. Now, similar to the Fellow, they thought ahead. Now, the Fellow, you didn't have to change anything to go from 54 to 58. On this dosing cup, it actually has this rubber ring that fits your 58 millimeter portafilter perfectly. But let's say you have a Breville, you can peel that little rubber ring off and it also fits the 54 perfectly. So that's a really cool feature, and you're probably not gonna swap it back and forth. Now, this rubber ring does kind of hold on to some of your fines, which I found just a little bit annoying. It's not the end of the world. It's really not gonna affect your cup of coffee, but I wish that it wasn't rubber, but I know why they did it. So that's the overview of this grinder. I feel like it did a really good job of brewing espresso as well as all your filter coffee. I've done quite a bit of filter coffee, and I feel like this one did very good with filter coffee. I even did some cold brew with it, and it turned out very nice. So I felt like pretty solid grinder for 200 bucks, and I felt like compared to the $400 Preciso that I used to use, really nice bang for your buck out of this ESP Encore. Okay, we can talk all day about features, but which one's gonna be the best for you? And that's really up for you to determine, but I'm gonna go over just some of my findings in the way that I'm thinking here. So if we're gonna talk espresso first, which one would I choose for espresso? And I would say hands down, I'd choose the SK40 for espresso. It works great, it has the fine adjustment, it has a nice dosing cup, it's quiet, it's easy to use, it's super easy to dial in. It has enough clarity for espresso that I found it to be really enjoyable. So my number 1 pick for espresso would be this SK40. My number 2 pick would probably be this Baratza ESP. The ESP I found really easy to dial in. I found that their shots tasted quite similar to the SK40. So they have a fairly similar burr pattern. It is different, but it's a very similar burr pattern, and I found it to be just really nice espresso shots that came out of the ESP. It does have the single dose, which I feel like does make it a lot easier to utilize the grinder instead of using that square bin. That's what I actually used for quite a few years with my Preciso, and made it really easy to use for espresso. Third, I would choose the SD40. I still don't think it's that difficult to dial in, but it is fully capable of dialing in a nice espresso shot. So if you're more leaning towards your drip brew methods, but you do want to have the capability of pulling some conical espresso shots and you're trying to save a few bucks, this SD40 is gonna work out nicely for you. And then last is the Fellow, and I don't wanna rag on it too much, but I just didn't really have very enjoyable espresso out of it. Now, the workflow was fair. I felt like it was still quite messy. The dosing cup worked really nice. It's just bulky and strange, I found. But ultimately, I'm talking taste here. I don't really care about the workflow as much as I talk about enjoying a cup of coffee. So I really just did not find this to make a nice cup of espresso personally. Okay, let's talk about Brew. So let's say that espresso is not really your thing, or you have maybe a dedicated flat burr espresso grinder and you're just looking for a conical that's used more for just brew methods. It'd be a really hard decision between the ESP and the SD40 because both of these perform very similarly. I feel like the build of the grinder on the SD40 is much more superior than the Baratza. But just know that Baratza has really excellent customer support. So when I had my Preciso on the fine adjustment settings, that fine adjustment ring was very temperamental and would break. This doesn't have that on, and I think they did that on purpose because it was so fragile that it would crack, and then you get really inconsistent espresso shots. So this has their more robust adjustment ring, but you don't get that real fine adjustment that you could get with that Preciso. So between these two, you're really not gonna have a problem with drip. After that, it probably doesn't matter. This one will do drip just fine. This one also does drip just fine. I felt like the flavor out of this was still off, and I don't know why. It was just not my favorite for drip. So I hope this helps you make a decision if you're in the market for a grinder. Maybe you are getting your first grinder and $200 is a stretch. I mean, it's $200 for a coffee grinder, and that can be quite a bit of money. I hope this helps you make that informed decision on what works best for you. Are you doing espresso? Are you doing brew methods? What's your workflow look like? I really don't think you can go wrong with any of these, but I definitely lean towards these three from just a personal standpoint. This one just really underperformed for me, unfortunately. I know some other people have used it and they really find it to be quite nice. So potentially it's just me. But yet again, I just hope that this helps you make that decision. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the link below. It always helps us out to hit subscribe so that we can produce more content like this in the future. If you have any questions on any other products that we sell, make sure to give us a shout and we'll try to do a video. Thanks for watching.